Hey Pathfinders, welcome. If you're here, you want to learn about lichens, liverworts, and mosses. And if you're here, you might think you know what they are. What's a moss? I bet you think it's that. Right there. Well, you'd be right, that is moss, but there is more to it than that. They look very different, and if you go in your backyard, you'll see mosses. I'm looking over here. I see 1, 2, 3 kinds of lichen on the trees, in the woods there, moss under here, all different kinds of things out here in nature. Get outside, come with us, learn about it. What is a moss? Well, it's a little green, usually green plant like we saw over there, usually moist environments, reproduces with spores. What's a lichen? Let me get my handy paper. I'm going to read you the definition. Lichens are symbiotic associations of a fungus with a photosynthetic partner called a photobiont that can produce food for the lichen from sunlight. The photobiont is usually either green algae or cyanobacterium. Yeah, useless. I don't know what those big words mean. So a lichen basically is a 2-part plant. It needs a friend. It's a fungus, and it's something else that helps it with photosynthesis from sunlight made food. That's all you need to know. 2 parts, 2 friends. Fungus, something that helps it photosynthesize food. Not gonna litter. Now what's a liverwort? I don't know, you got me. I can't find one. They're usually found in the tropics. I did read that maybe you might see them floating in a pond. Maybe they're near like wet things. Obviously, you're not going to see it here, but they're called liverworts because I think if you squint, tilt your head a little, the lobes of it kind of look like the lobes in your liver. That's why someone gave them that name. But again, small green plant, moist environments, just like a moss. So we are going to go take a field trip. Let's go. Hat, sunscreen, sunglasses, lawn pants. We're good to go. Come on. So we are here. This is one of my secret places I like to come because not a lot of people come here. It's conservation land, so it's not a big park. It's not a town, park everybody comes to, but it's got lots of trails and it's got the things we need when we're hunting lichens, liverworts, and mosses. So namely, there are wet, damp areas because there are some ponds, creeks, streams, but there's also lots of things these plants like. There's the trees, number one. There are dead trees, there's stumps, boulders, rocks. All these things you'll be able to find these different plants on. And you've probably passed them by when you walk outside all the time and never noticed just how many there were and how many varieties there were. We're going over all these bumps. It's a bumpy road back here, which is probably why not a lot of people come. But it's one of my favorite spots. So we'll see what we can find. Like I said, liverworts, I haven't been able to find one. They're mostly in the tropics, but some of them around here, you might be able to see them floating in water. So I haven't seen that yet. Maybe we'll see it today. I don't know. But we're going to pull in here and we will hope for the best. All right, we are here. So lichens, liverworts, mosses, they all don't look the same. So what do they have in common? They reproduce with spores. Okay, some reproduce asexually, some reproduce sexually. We're going to get into all that later. But right now, while we're here, we are going to go try and look at some and identify some. And I'm going to show you a really cool nature app that you're probably going to want to download on your phone as well. So let's go. So we are in the woods. You can tell because the bugs are swarming, but that's okay because what are we here for? Not the bugs. Moss, lichens, liverworts. So when you're walking, look up, You'll see them on the trees. Look down, you'll see at the base of the trees. Look on the ground, you'll see stuff everywhere. And we're gonna even take a little side path. We're gonna go down a side path. I guarantee we'll find stuff there. So let's come this way. Right there. Look at that. Can you see this? This is a moss. You probably didn't think that was a moss, but it's a common hair-cap moss. Right there, you probably walk by it all the time, never knew what it was. Bam, first moss. How many do we need for mosses? 6. Okay, keep going. Right here. We'll talk about the lichen later. On the tree, see this? Shingle moss. Number 2. We had common haircap, shingle moss. Let's keep going. Look down, up, right there. I bet you've seen these all over the place in the woods. We call it princess pine. It's also called flat branch tree club moss. That's 3 out of your 6, and we took what, 10 steps? Bam, we are on the roll. Let's keep going. Like I said earlier, you can find a lot of things on tree trunks, on tree stumps, and we walked by this beauty of a stump, and we're in luck. It has 2 kinds of mosses. Now, quick fact. You might have heard that moss grows on the north side of a tree. So if you're lost, you can tell where north is by looking at the tree trunk, and if the moss is on one side, that side's north. That is not totally true. It does grow on the north side. Not all the time, mostly it does. And guess what? If you're in the southern hemisphere, guess what side of the tree it grows on? The southern side. So, anyway, back to our mosses on this tree stump. They are beautiful. If you get up close, I believe this that kind of looks like stars is called Catherine's moss. If you get a close-up look at it, it's really, really pretty. It's got all the little shoots coming out of it that its spores will be released from. And then the stump keeps on giving because right up above it is what's called lesser smooth cap moss. Okay, so if you look at that, you can see the difference. And one kind of looks star-shaped. The other one almost, I don't know what it looks like. Looks like some little plants, I don't know, but they definitely look different. So all moss is not the same. So that brings us up to 5. We need 1 more moss, and we will keep looking. All right, we are looking for our last moss. I'm pumped. We found it. It's probably the most common one that you think of when you think of moss. Look at this beauty, right in here. What does that look like? That looks like a pincushion. Guess what they call that moss? Pincushion moss. And that's the one that you probably see most everywhere. I'm looking at this down tree along here. Look at that beautiful, beautiful green. It looks like velvet all along that tree. Pincushion moss. That's an easy one to remember. So, what do we use moss for? Is there any value to it other than being out here along the trail? Yes, there are things moss is used for. I bet you never knew. World War II or I, I don't know, doesn't matter. What do you think they could have used it for? They used it to dress wounds. They also used it for pillows. You're out there, you can't carry your nice little down pillow with you. Stuff it in a blanket, lay down, nice and soft. What else is it used for? Wallpaper. Yes, seriously, a certain kind of moss they used for wallpaper in the early 1900s. Don't know that I'd want that on my wall, but whatever, that's what they used it for. How about landscaping? If you've heard of bonsai plants and like bonsai plantings, they always have moss in there. Peat moss. If you're trying to plant gardens, plant yards, you know, grass and stuff, peat moss. There's all kinds of things that moss is good for. Jot them all down. Medicines, I thought that was the coolest one. Write them down. Those are answers I just gave you to one of the questions, whatever it was in this honor. What's moss used for? Onward to find our lichens. Yes! So, are you tired like I am? Come on, guys. But while we're sitting, if you get up close and take a real close look at this, real close, see those little black dots? Can you see that? This is smoky-eyed boulder lichen. So you'll find that on boulders and rocks. Pretty cool. We're gonna keep going because, like I said, I'm not tired. Oh, I found my favorite. This is called crumpled rag lichen. What a perfect name, right? Isn't this the coolest thing? Can you see it? Crumpled rag lichen. This is like my favorite one. I'm going to turn it over. You can see the bottoms. Very, very cool. That one you usually find on the forest floor. Okay, off to the water. On our way to the water, I look down and look at this beautiful lichen. This is called a bushy beard lichen. And if you get up close, you can see the little caps that would have the spores, the little white things. Such a beauty. It's so different than the ones you see on the trees because it's like feathery almost. What a beautiful specimen. Maybe, just maybe, we'll see the liverwort at the water. Let's keep going. Okay, here we are on this tree. You've probably seen this when you're out and about and you've seen all this stuff on the trees and you're thinking, you know, the trees are dying, whatever. No, this is common green shield lichen. And this is a favorite spot for it on these trees. So what do you think are lichens even beneficial to us or to the environment? What do they do? So there are some lichens. There's a type called reindeer lichen. Why do you think it's called reindeer lichen? Because the reindeer like to eat it. There are other kinds of lichens that are sensitive to pollution. And so they're used as pollution indicators. Manufactured pollutants, they change color or dye even. So people have used them for that, to show where pollution might be. They've also been used as dyes and in medicines. I know in Russia, I think World War I or II, again, don't know, they use lichen in medicines. Now, they don't use them so much for dyes anymore because we have synthetic dyes, but there's all kinds of things that these plants that you walk by all the time, don't even know what they are, they're beneficial. God made everything to be beneficial, and a walk in the woods will show that. So, this was lichen number 4. I think we have 2 more we have to look for. Maybe we'll find reindeer lichen. I've seen it around here, even though there aren't reindeer here. Other deer might eat it, but we're going to keep walking and see if we can find those last 2. So let's go. As we were walking along, I know we need 1 more lichen, and I see this tree here, and it's got a couple of different kinds on it. We already talked about that green shield lichen. You can see the green. But you can probably also see kind of some white spots, and I think that's whitewash lichen. But I'm going to show you a cool app on my phone. It's called iNaturalist, by the letter I, Naturalist. And that's why I've had my phone with me as we've walked, because if you see something and you're curious what it is, you can take a picture of it, and it'll come back with suggestions. So I just open the app. Then you click on the camera part, and I'm going to try and zoom in and take a picture of the white spots. Okay, then you click next, and it comes up and there's a little question. It says, what did you see? So you click on that and it's going to come back hopefully with suggestions of what it thinks you're looking at. So sometimes it'll tell you what the tree type is, or if there's leaves nearby, it'll tell you what that is. And here it is. I see whitewashed lichen, and I'm going to click on that. And to me, that looks very much like the spot there. Looks very much like the picture here came back with. So it's a really cool app, iNaturalist. It's a free download, and you can take pictures of anything as you're walking. So this just confirmed our last lichen, whitewashed lichen, because it looks like whitewash. If you ever read Tom Sawyer and got his friend to paint the fence for him, whitewash. So that's our last one. So if you're out walking and you come up to a place here and you're like, do I go this way? Do I go that way? Which way does the trail go? Trail sign on the tree. If you look at it, that first rectangle on the left, that's your trail. The one on the right means stay to the right to stay on the trail. So if you're ever out somewhere and you're unsure, look for those signs that'll point you in the right direction. And as an added bonus for you while I'm standing here, I'm looking at these really pretty flowers. If you look at them, they kind of look like stars. Guess what they're called? Star flowers. Wow, that was a creative name. Lots of things you can see in the woods. Get out there, people. So we need to talk about how do mosses, lichens, and liverworts reproduce. This is a level 3 honor, so we gotta get into this stuff a little bit. So we're gonna start with mosses because I think they're the easiest. So from basic biology, if you guys have taken biology, you know animals have 2 sets of chromosomes. So we have 2 sets of matching chromosomes. You get 1 set from your mom, 1 set from your dad. They're all paired up. That's called diploid too. So mosses are different from most plants because for most of the time they have 1 set that's called haploid. So diploid, matching sets of chromosomes, haploid, 1 set of chromosomes. So the life cycle of a moss starts, and these 3 plants we're talking about, most of them start with spores. And I'm laying on the ground because I found a cool example of what I wanted to talk about. So if you look close, see these little dark things on these filaments? These are teeny tiny, so they have spores inside them, which means the spores are even teeny tinier. And this thing is called an operculum. And when this brown part degenerates and kind of opens, that's how the spores are released. And each of these spores, remember there's, inside these, each of these spores germinates and it forms, here's another big word, protonema, which basically is a fancy word for like a root structure. And then from that, you get a leafy green gamete, like a metophyte, that develops. And then from that, you can either have male and female parts on that, or they can be separate plants. But just like human reproduction, when the sperm from the male combines with the egg, you get a zygote. And then the zygote will create these capsules again, and the process starts all over again. So it's kind of, that's kind of the easy version of how mosses reproduce. They can reproduce asexually as well, and that takes place, the reproduction takes place inside of those little capsules that I showed you. So some big words in there, you can look them up, but basically if you ever see these little things, you know that's where the spores come from. So now we have to go find lichens, and we'll talk about how lichens reproduce. So we're going to talk about lichens now, and if you remember when we first talked about them, a lichen is a different type of plant because it has a symbiotic relationship. So you have a fungus, and it has to have something like an algae or a bacterium that helps it with photosynthesis, because plants need photosynthesis to use the sunlight to make food. So for a lichen, you have to have those 2 things. Now I'm sitting here on the sidewalk because as I was walking, I saw this green shield lichen down here on the sidewalk, so we can talk about it. And so a fungus, the filaments kind of enclose, like surround and grow into the algae part. and it kind of forms, like if you look at it just like this, it looks like it's one type of organism, even though it's really two. But there is a structure called the epiphytic, and it's a fungal reproductive structure, and that is what releases spores. So sometimes on lichens you'll see maybe kind of a saucer shape or cup shape thing on a filament like the moss you saw over there, and that's what releases the spores. There are some other ways a lichen can be produced. So if it decays in the ground, it can break into two or more parts. Fragmentation, maybe the wind breaks it or an animal bites it or something. And soredia, which really is just another word that means the spores, it reproduces and is dispersed by air currents, because remember, those spores are so tiny, they're going to be blown around by any wind that goes by. The one thing it needs, no matter how it's reproducing here, it's got to have that algal part, because it needs that symbiotic relationship to grow. So if you just have the fungus, it's not going to form a lichen. It needs to find that algal part. So not all are going to survive. If they can't find the right algal part it needs, it's not going to survive. So now, since we can't find a liverwort, I'm going to have to show you maybe some pictures on the computer to explain how a liverwort reproduces. So that's what we're going to go do now. Before we talk about the life cycle of liverworts, I just want to talk about it again, because they really are kind of a unique plant. We just don't see them a lot around here, mostly in the tropical climates. But the thing that sets it apart, all plants have a root structure called a rhizoid. And the thing that sets a liverwort apart from other plants is its rhizoid is unicellular instead of multicellular. That is the big difference. And sometimes you actually might see, if a person has an aquarium at home, you might see liverworts in the aquarium, because they're used for lots of different things. They put them in there for bubble netting. Some fish like to make little bubbles. If you've ever seen, I forget what they're called, the fighting fish, the betta fish. They like to make little bubbles. So sometimes a liverwort is in there for bubble netting, so they can put bubbles in there. It oxygenates the water. Sometimes if you have multiple fish in there, the little young fry can hide in and amongst the liverworts. So it really is kind of a unique, cool looking plant. So I'm gonna show you a couple pictures of them, because we couldn't find them out here in all our nature walks. So a couple of them, I'll let you see them now, and then we're going to talk about the life cycle of the liverwort. And again, it starts with a spore. There are alternating generations between haploid, which remember we said a haploid is one set of chromosomes, and diploid, which is two sets of chromosomes. So again, a liverwort is kind of interesting like that. It's got alternating generations. One time haploid, one time diploid. The haploid spores can grow into something called a gametophyte, and then that grows into a multicellular organism, and it produces gametes. And these gametes are like spores, except when they're fertilized, they form a new cell, which is called a zygote. And it's diploid, it has two sets of chromosomes. So you went from the spore with one set of chromosomes that is haploid to now you have a zygote that's two sets of chromosomes in there. And it produces more spores, and those spores are haploid. So it goes that's the alternating generation. You have spores that are haploid, it goes through the whole process to form a zygote, which is diploid. That produces more spores, which are haploid. So the sporophyte and the gametophyte are of the plants. Those two versions of the plants look very different. and the gametophyte version is what's considered the dominant life cycle in the liverwort. So that's kind of a generalization, kind of overview of the life cycle of a liverwort. Hopefully it made a little bit of sense, but you can look it up. It is pretty interesting. One of the requirements for this honor is to make a terrarium, and it can be a simple, really easy thing that costs no money. You need a container, so I went actually and literally dug through my big recycle bucket, and I pulled out this jar with a lid. You can also get a baby food jar or like a plastic juice bottle, cut that off, and you could put plastic over the top with a rubber band. There's all different ways, because really what you're making is kind of a self-contained little garden. So the heat from it inside, from the dirt and the moss and the plants, is going to cause the water vapor to evaporate, and then it'll condense then on the sides and come back down. So it's just like a little water cycle in there. So to make a terrarium, 3 things you need. You need a layer of gravel or rocks at the bottom, then a layer of dirt, and then your plants on top. So the rocks on the bottom are for when the moisture does come back down to the plants, to the dirt. Extra moisture will go all the way down and sit down where the rocks are rather than up on the roots of the plants, because you don't want root rot. So I'm out here at my garden because I know there's lots of weeds and rocks in it. So I'm going to collect some rocks to make a layer here in the bottom. You can use whatever you want, little gravel. You can buy stuff if you want, but I say just go outside and dig up a bunch of rocks and put a layer in. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Dig up a few. As you can see, there's lots and lots of them. You can do little tiny ones, you can do bigger ones, it doesn't really matter. It's just you want to have, at least have some kind of a layer there. I might try and stay away from my plants that are actually growing among the weeds here. So there's all different, I'm going to do a little bit more. I like to look at the layers, so you can kind of make a pretty cool layer. And that's really probably about all you need. Don't need a ton. Okay, so earlier I went and I dug up some dirt, and again, just go out in your yard and you can get dirt wherever you can find it. I took some from my garden, so I'm going to put a layer of dirt on top. So you can't, if I had put more rocks in the bottom, you would have been able to see a layer of rocks. You can't really see that because the dirt's down there. And then from before, I had dug up some little moss plants. Requirements were to put a couple kinds of mosses, like 2 or 3 kinds of mosses. You can throw a lichen in there if you want. Mine, I'm going to put 3 kinds of mosses because I found them here. I found one that I really like. It's called a twisted moss, and I don't know if you can get up close and see why it's called that, but you can see it's all just kind of curly, all little twisted things. So to get a piece of moss, you don't have to like dig and cut a whole chunk of it. I have this little knife. I'm just going to try and take just a little bit of it. I have a bag that I can put it in. And I'm going to put, this is going to be one of the ones in my terrarium. Probably should try this. Oh, there we go. So that's twisted moss. And then I have another one over here. I'm not real confident on what kind it is, but it's kind of cool looking. If you can see, it's almost looks like little trees sticking up. So I'm going to take another piece of this one. Oops. It's on a tree root. And again, you don't have to go real deep. So that's my second one. And then I saw over here I like this white moss in the shadows because I want to add a little color. And this one's kind of different because most mosses you see are that green color, but this is a lighter color one. You can see that. Okay, so those are my 3. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you how to put it all together. You can just put them, really, you just lay them on the top. However you want it to look. And I got different kinds because I wanted to see what it would look like. Really put it like that. And then I'm going to go inside. I'm going to put a little water in. You don't want to overwater it. I'm going to put a little water in, put the top on it, and really that's it. You shouldn't even have to open the jar for a couple of months because that water cycle will keep circulating everything inside. And what I encourage you to do, once you water them and put that lid on, check back in a day or 2 and look at the moss because you'll see some of them will have changed. I know these little twisted curlicue ones open up. Here they kind of open up almost to look like star moss. This one that changes color from lighter to darker. So it's kind of cool, it's kind of fun to look at. But basically that's it. It's very simple to make a homemade terrarium. So have fun with that. I wanted to just show you about the water to put in because you don't want to take a whole bunch of water and just dump it in. You want to get it wet, you want to get it moist because then you're going to close it up. But I don't want to dump this whole dish in, so I'm trying to get them wet and also some of the dirt wet, you know, kind of like a good rainstorm. And then I'm just going to close it up. And when you put this on your counter, you don't want it in direct sunlight because that'll make it too hot and you'll get mold growing on the sides of the container. So if that happens, just kind of put it to the side in the shade. You want it to have indirect sunlight, so you want it bright but not the sun directly on it. And it should just, the water in the soil and the plants should evaporate and then condense on the sides, and it should just keep going. You really shouldn't have to open it up. You can just look at it and enjoy it and check out the changes that you see in the plants over the next couple of months that you have. A very simple, very easy thing to do. I just wanted to also tell you before I let you go that there's so many different kinds of lichens and mosses and liverworts, and you know, they all can look very different. Even some of the lichens can be bright orange. I have a picture of that. I saw that down on the coast when I was walking. Really pretty. So when you go out and when you're walking, you know, look down and look around and be surprised how many different kinds that you'd see just as you were walking. And the other thing we didn't really talk about were the spore caps on these things, and they're about 95% of all moss species are in something called, I want to say it right, Bryopsida. That's the class. So 95% of mosses are in that species, and their spore caps, when they open, they actually have like little kind of feathery looking teeth. They call them teeth. There's a special word they use, arthrodontus, which sounds like orthodontics, which is, you know, why you call them teeth. But they have, so most of them have that, but some of them don't necessarily have that. They just, the spore cap will just open and the spores will go out. So there you have it. That's that was the moss, liverwort, and lichen honor. Hopefully you learned a few things. I am not an expert in it. I just think they're really cool and really fun to look at and learn about. So I hope you learned a few things. If you have questions, you can put it, you can email it or text it. You can send it to the conference. But you can look it up yourself. Go online. There's so much information out there, but really just have fun. Have a good day, guys.